Hey everybody, welcome to Requests Month. The first review is Street Fighter 4, specifically Super Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition. I'm reviewing the PC version, but it was also released on Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and in the arcades. This review is coming to you courtesy of Fusion Bunny. He sent this to me, so thank you, it is greatly appreciated. This is a fighting game and the fourth main game in Capcom's Street Fighter series. It was first released in 2008 in the arcades in Japan, and then it came to consoles in 2009, along with PC. And the version that I'm playing came out in 2010 in arcades, then 2011 on PC and console. There's also the Ultra Street Fighter 4 version in development right now. It's supposed to be coming out in early 2014, but there's no set release date yet. And so Capcom's up to its usual thing with their Street Fighter games, where they release 40 different versions of the same game. But the question here is, since I haven't really played all that much Street Fighter over the years, and in fact this was the first Street Fighter game I really got to play, what did I think of it? Because Street Fighter is basically the hallowed ground for fighting games, particularly Street Fighter 2. So how does Street Fighter 4 actually work? Well, as far as the presentation goes, it's a mixed bag. And I say that because a lot of the issues I have with it are actually personal issues rather than it just is low quality. As far as visuals go, it's pretty high quality actually. It's got some pretty solid modeling, very smooth, fluid animations that flow very nicely together. It's got pretty decent texture work for the most part, especially considering what platforms it was really developed for, and that this is basically just a port straight from the consoles. And so it looks pretty solid for what it is, and it runs pretty well. But the problem I have with it is just that they've gone for this bizarre art style with all of this, and so you have this fairly high quality modeling and animation and everything, but it's mixed with this art style where there's these heavy dark outlines around everything, and while that doesn't really bother me, it's just that the people themselves look odd. It's like they tried to make this 2D art style work in a 3D environment, and it doesn't actually work out all that well as far as I'm concerned. It's really just a personal thing there. Some people will like the art style, some people won't. I personally don't like it, but it's just an odd art style that either will take you some getting used to, you'll either like it, or you won't. It's pretty straightforward. The sound design, on the other hand, is rather solid. You've got some pretty solid music, which gets you in the good fighting game mood. You've got the voice acting, which is actually on, at least in the North American release, it's both in Japanese or English. You can swap between them. I actually run it with Japanese voiceovers, so just because it feels better that way. The English voice acting is kind of cheesy. In fact, it's not kind of cheesy, it's extremely cheesy. So I run Japanese voiceovers in this, and it works rather well. The sound effects themselves are also very well done. It really does get you in this mood of beating the living crap out of the other guy. So they've done a good job with the sound design, and obviously there's nothing in there that really is a personal problem for me, because it all fits together with the fighting game very, very well. But obviously what really matter in games are the story and the gameplay, and the story in this really doesn't matter at all, oddly enough. Why? For a couple of reasons. One, it's a fighting game. I don't really care about the stories in fighting games. I just don't. That's the fact of the matter. Because they generally don't do much to integrate the stories into the games, and they really didn't do much in this one to integrate the story into the game either. So mostly what you're getting in this one is also the setup for why characters are fighting all these dudes, and it's pretty weak. It's just the kind of thing that you're used to from Street Fighter at this point. The whole I want to be the very best thing. Although that sounds like Pokemon, but I guess it doesn't really matter all that much, because in the long run I didn't care about the story for any of the characters or the overarching story of the game. So, what about the gameplay? Well, the gameplay is where things got interesting. Remember, this is the first Street Fighter game I've really gotten a chance to sit down and play. And so, I'm pretty much going into this thing with a fresh perspective, although I am aware of the previous Street Fighter games and what they did and all that sort of thing. I didn't really get a chance to play them. This is the first one I really got a chance to play. So how is it to someone like me who is pretty new to the series as far as playing it goes? Well, control-wise, even on a keyboard, it feels really good. I mean, the smoothness of the fighting mechanics in this game is undeniable. And that's pretty much what I've expected from what I know about other Street Fighter games. Smooth as butter as far as controls and being really in control of your character and all that goes. It plays really well even on PC, even on a keyboard. And so it's pretty much what I expected as far as reputation goes. And from what I can tell, it's pretty much what you would expect from a Street Fighter game. The difference in this one is not only additional characters, which you would expect from a follow-up to another Street Fighter game, but this thing called focus attacks, where the basic idea is that you will be able to absorb a single hit and then immediately counterattack. And this allows you to have this very cool counter thing going, where you really do have to read your opponent very well. And this is a very integral part of the game. Now, the AI doesn't really use it as much as they probably should, and I didn't really play this much online because I would get my ass handed to me, for one, and for another, it uses games for Windows Live, so it's a nightmare to get working anyway. But suffice to say, I can see where this would be a very, very strong game in a competitive sense. And that's what I've seen as well. I've seen it used in tournaments, and it's obvious that there is a certain level of skill in this game, to where you really do have to know what you're doing to be good at it. And it's more than just button mashing. And in fact, button mashing tends not to work. So they've done an interesting thing with that focus system. They've also added in something called ultra combos, which is a meter that fills up when you take damage. And once it gets to a certain point, you can pull off an ultra combo as opposed to just a super combo or an EX special, which are your special attacks, obviously. So take Ryu, for instance. He has the Hadouken, which is his normal missile attack that you've seen in countless Street Fighter games. Then he has the Shinku Hadouken, which is a powered up version that hits multiple times. And then the Ultra Combo, which is the Metsu Hadouken, which is something that normally was reserved for Evil Ryu, but in this one, Ryu himself can use it as an Ultra Combo. And it's pretty much just a Shinku Hadouken in this game, oddly enough. But that gives you a general idea of the progression here. You have your normal special attacks, then you have something like a Super Combo or an EX move, which would be the Shinku Hadouken or something like that. And then you have the Ultra Combo, which is the Metsu Hadouken. So it gives you this extra dimension of really powerful moves to actually be able to just annihilate your opponent. And I have to say, when you actually do manage to pull off, say, an Ultra Combo and, say, finish the match with it, you feel like a badass. So they've done a good job with that. Now, all of this blends together to make a really, really solid fighting game experience. And I haven't talked much about the version I'm playing, which is Super Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition. So what does that do? Not a whole lot, actually. Basically what this did was rebalance the game, where they've made a bunch of tweaks to the various characters and how much damage they do, all that sort of things. They've thrown in some new EX moves, and so you just have more moves in your repertoire. They've also added in 2 new characters, Yunun Yang, and they made Evil Ryu and Oni playable right out of the box, as opposed to just being the hidden bosses in the game. So that's pretty much it. They didn't really do all that much else to change the game, and the new stuff is appreciated. It's not really a huge improvement over Street Fighter 4, from what I can tell. Maybe as far as the balancing goes, it's a big deal, but for someone who doesn't really play fighting games competitively like myself, But not having played the original version of Street Fighter 4, I really can't say all that much about the big tweaks and everything. I really go into it with the Super Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition experience in mind, because that's what I've got. So, I apologize for that. Someone in the comments can probably comment more on this, but I can't really say all that much about it because that's just my experience with it. So, ultimately, Super Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition, in particular, is a very solid fighting game experience. It's pretty much what I expected from Street Fighter. I expected it to be a very smooth, fluid combat system that feels really nice to actually play. I've expected it to have the sort of flashy combos and EX special moves and such that I've seen before, and all sorts of videos and everything that I've been watching and all that. I expected it to have this level of skill in there where you really do have to have all that skill to be able to be really good at the game, and I expected it to be very solid for a competitive experience, and that's exactly what it is. So it lived up to expectations. It didn't blow me away, but it did live up to expectations, and I really do have to factor in that it does use Games for Windows Live, which is just ridiculous. That thing is horrible. So ultimately, I give Street Fighter 4 a 4 out of 5. Thanks for watching.